One, two, three, pick it up, go!
Mankind must put an end to war. A war will put an end to mankind.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Well, I'm not drunk. I earned everything I got.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person.
Hello, Internet. This is Elliot, and this is Blind Partisan. I'm here, as usual, with Jacob.
Feels like it's been forever since you and I have been on camera together.
Are we on camera together? Because we have two cameras.
Oh, good point.
You could be in a secret location.
That is true. There's no proof that we are in the same location.
Yeah, well, I mean, you came back from the dead.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So today's topic, we were batting around for quite a while what we wanted to talk about until we ended up getting stuck on our favorite topic, that being technology and how it relates to politics. And I'm surprised because it's kind of gone under the political radar, if you will, that there's this big conversation going on about big tech and how much power it may or may not have. And particularly, we have certain candidates for president who are bringing up the possibility of breaking up large technology companies. Mm-hmm. And we've yet to really discuss this. And I don't know if I'd say it's a popular idea, but it's a popular talking point, something to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, so there are people in the current administration, I guess, that have talked about there being some issues with some of the big tech companies, and so some of the big tech companies, when we're talking about that, I think some of it is politically motivated. When it comes to the Trump administration,
we know the Trump administration very much does not like.
He doesn't like Bezos, so he's talking about Amazon.
He doesn't like Google because
right.
That's been a trend, though. You know, people going, "I Googled my name and Google said I am bad person."
Right.
I'm like that.
Yeah, so I think he feels like there's this left leaning
conspiracy
tech conspiracy among Silicon Valley and lumping Amazon, which isn't really in Silicon Valley, in there.
Well, neither is Microsoft,
and neither is Microsoft,
because Microsoft's what, Redmond.
Yeah, they're
Washington?
in Washington. Yeah, they're up there with
like second Silicon Valley,
right?
In Washington,
right? So I mean, it's tough to tease these things out, right? Like, which of these things are them just playing politics on both sides? Whether it's the Trump people or the Democrats.
Now, the person I've heard talk a lot about it is Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
And by heard a lot about it, I mean I've read like 4 or 5 headlines in the past month or two that
so she has a billboard. I don't know if I can get this under the screen here. Can you see that?
Who knows?
Producer. Can you see that billboard? Is that showing up? Yeah. So it says break up big tech. And you can text tech to 24477 to join our fight. So that's Elizabeth Warren. She has a big billboard. It says on the San Francisco's primary Caltrain stop, right outside the headquarters for Lyft and Dropbox. So like right in Silicon Valley. So so she's like right in the thick of things there, promoting this agenda.
So I'm sure Elizabeth Warren has written out a 7,000-page plan on what she's going to do, how she's going to do it, why she's going to do it, where she's going to do it, when she's going to do it.
Is this publicly available?
I don't know. I've never read it.
Yeah, if you find it, you have to put it out because I want to read this. Because that's where I'm really interested. Because I don't necessarily have anything against big companies being broken up as long as this can happen in a way that actually preserves competition.
Which we've struggled with in the past.
We've screwed it up.
I mean,
it's always been screwed up.
We broke up the phone companies.
And it screwed it up.
look where the phone companies are now.
Well,
if anything, they're in a worse state than they were when they were broken up.
It made no sense. So we broke up the phone companies, and what did we do? We created regional monopolies.
Yep.
I don't understand.
And then allowed them to slowly buy each other up until they were just as big, if not bigger.
Yeah.
So
it made no sense.
My biggest complaint with this isn't the idea of breaking up big tech. It's not the idea of not breaking up big tech. It's more a puzzlement as to why big tech is the focus, because there are other industries that I think are much worse off. Would you agree? I think, sure, it's related to technology, but look how bad our broadband is, and we haven't done anything about it.
Okay. Wow.
I'll give you the platform.
Yeah, so I didn't think we were going to get into that. But the problem is that government already regulates that stuff. So they're in bed with these guys. So neither party wants to rock the boat on the campaign contributions and the regulatory environment of something that's already highly regulated. So whether you're talking about the telcos, like you mentioned, or the cable companies, or the cellular providers, whatever aspect of this you want to talk about, they're already involved politically. They're in the mix. All of those guys are big time. So I mean, yeah, something should happen with that. We should actually create a free market in telecom. But we have never had that. We've never had that. I did turn my volume off, and then it turned back on.
I'm wondering, good excuse. I'm wondering, are we focusing on big tech for a specific reason? What's the problem? Is the problem, A, these companies have too much influence on what people see? Is it B, these companies have too much control over our data? Is it C, they're just scary sounding?
I think it is. It's like a combination of all those things, right? So, and I think from the Republican side of things, they're afraid that these companies are owned and managed by people who push left-leaning viewpoints. I think that's their trigger.
You're a libertarian who has frequently voted Republican. Do you feel that's accurate?
So I don't. There is implicit bias. So for the same reason that that I want more women and minorities in tech, so that we can avoid implicit bias, putting bias into things without even realizing it, right? I think that if you have a liberal bias, you hire people with a liberal bias, you create things with a liberal bias. And what does that even mean? It's implicit. There's just certain categories of things that you maybe don't even create products for, whatever, right? So there's an implicit bias, and it's really hard to pinpoint what that even is, right?
But would you say there's an intentional bias?
Nope, I don't. Okay. I would not. I don't think that Apple has an intentional bias, but Tim Cook and Steve Jobs were most definitely liberal. Larry and Sergey from Google, definitely liberal. Jeff Bezos, I think he's a little more in the middle. But he's
hated by Trump, so
Well, he bought a left-leaning newspaper.
Yes.
So, but I think he's probably very middle. I haven't heard him push left.
I think personally, Zuckerberg's probably on the more conservative side.
I think he's in the middle. But I bet he is in Silicon Valley, and you can't help if you live there, you automatically are left of center, or you just can't. You cannot be right of center and live in Silicon Valley.
You bring up a good point about that, because naturally our media tends to exist in liberal bubbles.
Yeah.
But that applies for the conservative media too. I mean, look at every host of Fox News, and I guarantee every single one of them lives in what you'd consider a liberal paradise.
You mean in New York?
Right, in New York or LA or San Francisco
or
DC or even like Austin, Texas.
I don't know.
So,
I mean, the hosts, I think, are primarily New York, aren't they? Fox News mostly New York.
Maybe. I think so.
I don't watch
I think they've got
I don't
some,
watch it, so I don't
yeah,
know.
neither do I. But I think they've got some hosts out of LA as well.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that though.
Yeah.
If you're an avid Fox News listener,
No, I've always wondered about that. Like, I don't know how right-leaning it really can be when so many of the people are in New York. And are they intentionally right-baiting?
I think so. I think I know this is totally unrelated to the tech thing, but I think a lot of your hosts on Fox News are actually quite liberal. But they play their characters because that's what, gets them the dough.
Very well be.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the first thing we need, the thing we should be pushing for, isn't break up the big tech companies, because yes, that may be important, but item number one on the list shouldn't be that. Item number one should be passing better protection over consumers' data. You, I'm sure, know the horror stories of what Facebook, Google, and the like can collect about you.
Yeah. So I really have mixed feelings about that, because regulations, what does that actually mean, right? So who regulates the regulators, and what happens if you get caught? What happens if you don't get caught?
Mm-hmm.
And what do the regulations actually say?
Right.
It's like you can say these are the intentions, but what do they actually say?
I think
so. Is it just like I just have a EULA, an end user license agreement, and you just agree to it, like like we have for when you install your Windows or Mac, and it's just like this big long list of things. You just, of course, click OK because you have no choice. I mean, okay, that doesn't mean anything.
No. I think the big things we need are, and this should be item number one on the list, not breaking up the big tech, is more transparency on what data is being collected. Even now, after some laws have been passed towards that direction, and even more so in other countries. The EU has plenty of laws on
and they're
this type of
terrible.
thing. But I think just having to have these companies say, yes, we are tracking your data and here's what we're looking for.
But here's the thing. Those laws were created for Google and Facebook to follow.
Yeah.
For the most part, they just do what they want and maybe pay a fine.
Right.
It's
all
the little companies that have to follow the rules because they can't afford the fine.
Right.
And so the unintended consequences are we just create these big obstructions to the little companies actually being able to compete. And Google and Facebook go about their merry way, and their dominance grows.
We can definitely tell you're a free market kind of guy.
This is the truth.
I see
this
where
is
you're
what
coming
is
from.
happening in Europe.
The other thing is we have had so many companies mishandle data.
Mm-hmm.
That's unacceptable. And the worst part is,
but how do you enforce that?
That's a great question.
We can't even get our government to enforce that on themselves.
I mean, look at the Equifax breach.
Right.
Equifax. What was it, like 40% of Americans had
Yeah.
all of their info?
You have one job,
Right.
to have my social security number and encrypt it. That's your one job. Credit score, social security number, encrypt. That's your whole business. How do you screw that up?
And they got it. And they then used that major breach of their own security to try and sell their own services. They then tried to secretly sign
successfully.
sign you into an agreement that you could not sue them.
Yeah.
And that's just the start of the list off the top of my head. They did tons of really shady stuff after it, and they got a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
For catastrophic data failure.
Right. But
and negligent.
But that is because politicians don't understand.
Yeah.
They don't understand.
You're right.
that is fundamentally a spreadsheet with 2 columns in it, and you encrypt it. This is not a complicated computer science problem. They failed at doing something super, super simple.
And then didn't report it for months.
Well, that's fraud.
Yeah.
And they should be prosecuted for fraud.
And they're not the only ones. There's so many companies who've had these different data leaks. I mean, Facebook themselves have had tons of them. Right. What is it?
If you don't disclose a security breach, you are guilty of fraud.
And should be punished accordingly.
Yeah.
And someone high up in the company should be seeing some jail time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows about a security breach is guilty of fraud.
Yep.
There is no other way to. There's nothing else you can do. It's no different than if you are you're an accessory to if Jacob walks into a bank and I work at the bank and he walks off with $1,000 and I see it happen and don't report it, I'm an accessory to that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same type of crime.
I'm worried that we're kind of missing the forest for the trees here with the idea of let's break them up.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to solve the fundamental problems we have.
Well, I know that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
But okay, so the idea with these companies becoming too big, and you mentioned before we got on that you were catching up on your Netflix during your illness.
Yes.
And so I was, because I'm a super fun guy, I was actually watching a bunch of documentaries about the bank bailouts over the weekend.
Your life is
I'm
riveting.
super fun. But our solution to the bank crisis was to make the banks bigger.
Right.
And that may have been a small, a short-term fix for these things. But then we walked away from that and, rubbed the sweat from our foreheads and said, phew, we're good now. We're not good. Like, we need to re-break up these banks and, maybe not put in new regulations, but certainly break them up because we cannot have too big to fail. Too big to fail should not be a thing anymore. And so we're talking about this in terms of tech now, and I think that this is a valid thing. So we're now at a point where, especially with outsourcing to the cloud means you're outsourcing your infrastructure to Amazon, Microsoft, or Google.
Yep. For
the most part, right? So
in general, yes.
So that they're between the three of them, they are at least half of the cloud. So like if one of the three of them go out, if they have an outage, that is a significant portion of our economy that is just shut down for that period of time.
It's really amazing to me that these same politicians who were complaining about an implicit liberal bias against them are the same ones who strip net neutrality. Do you see an irony in that as well?
Well, net neutrality is a terrible idea. Yeah.
Here we go.
Well, because that's just regulation. And we already have regulated telecoms. So that's just a terrible regulation on top of regulation. Terrible idea.
Net neutrality, if anything, is anti-regulation.
No, it's not.
In the fact that it's
it's not
telling these companies that they cannot regulate.
No.
Sure, it's government regulating them in that regard, but it's saying you cannot charge different amounts for different websites. You cannot slow down speeds to specific websites. You cannot.
And again, the actual implementation of that is what matters. Mm-hmm. How do you actually do that? These ideas are great, right?
Right.
The idea of regulations is super. It feels super good. Like we're gonna make people be good. So how does that actually work?
What's really worrying to me is you've brought up banks already.
Yeah.
I've brought up telecom.
Yeah.
We have big tech.
I know. Yeah, so it's not just Facebook that needs to be broken up?
That's the tip of the iceberg. I feel at this point like every industry.
Yeah.
every product, everything has become so corporate controlled. You know, you're a lifelong small businessman.
Yeah.
Right? Do you feel that same way where this world is more corporate than ever?
You know, so I have such mixed feelings about that, right? Because part of the American dream is to make it big, right?
Yeah.
Is to make it big, and usually that means make it big in business, and you know, make $1 million, make $1 billion, whatever the metric is that we're using to signify making it big, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to make that seem like that's criminal behavior. But in some cases, like that in and of itself is not. But in some cases, these companies do exhibit bad behavior. Yeah. And so I want to punish the bad behavior. I don't think being big by itself is bad behavior. But now that on the other hand of that, I don't want government to be complicit in allowing these companies,
which they are. They straight up are. You and I have, over the years now that we've known each other, there have been multiple times where we say, did you see that this has come up where this one company is trying to buy this other company? That's never going to happen, and they always get approved.
I just don't think that public companies should be allowed to buy other public companies.
Look how big Disney is.
Yeah.
Like, sure, it makes us all happy because, now we get all the Marvel characters, you know, we get the X-Men and everything or whatever. But look 5 years from now, right? How many of every film coming out in theaters are going to be made by Disney? Who's to say Disney's not going to keep buying?
Right. And we can be like, well, that's just entertainment. And when I look at the top 10 companies, none of them are entertainment, at least not solely entertainment, right? Fine. But I mean, so even take the entertainment companies out of the mix, right? There are a lot of companies that have gotten too big based on acquisitions. You know, on the list here, although in the top 10, a lot of them have not gotten too big, mostly because of acquisitions, though. AT&T has. I would say AT&T has.
The AT&T Time Warner thing just dropped my jaw.
Berkshire Hathaway is actually all about buying up like pieces of companies. And I think that I don't know how you exactly stop that, but I feel like a company shouldn't be able to buy stock in another company.
I don't know. I feel like
I just don't. There needs to be some. That seems to be a pretty simple rule that could be made.
I feel like it's impossible for us to stop any of that.
Well, I just feel like that is a pretty simple rule.
Government's in their corner.
I know, but
we can't stop that.
Well, but I don't know why we can't stop that. I think that there is this populist movement. I just don't know why I don't hear these very simple things being spoken about by Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. I'm not going to join their team until they say some of these things.
Maybe they have, and you just haven't heard it.
I haven't heard it. I haven't heard them say any of these simple things.
Elizabeth Warren got famous for being anti-big bank, you know,
right?
Just as an example,
right? But she's stacking all these other bad ideas in with maybe some of these good ones. Like,
in your opinion, not objectively bad ideas.
Some of them are objectively bad,
or your worldview.
Well, if you we have Europe to compare ourselves to. So when they overregulate certain things, we see the bad things that happen.
Okay.
So it becomes objectively bad.
But it's not always.
GDPR is objectively bad, and they're going to try to fix it, but it's objectively bad.
Can you briefly explain that in case anyone doesn't know what that is? Because I'd love to rant about that for a few minutes with you.
GDPR?
Yes.
Well, I forget what it stands for. It stands for, of course, that doesn't get General Data Protection Regulation. So it's the EU law that went into effect last May. So it's about a year old. And it is meant to It's the things that you were talking about earlier, where in the EU you have to disclose how your data is saved, how it's going to be utilized, so your personal data. So any website that is possibly going to be accessed by anybody in the EU now has to have these I consent things. This is why all these little pop-up things have come up where you have to consent to these things, and there's all these extra OK boxes you got to click now. And it ends up being just a bunch of nonsense that nobody pays attention to.
Then you had another one more recently the EU did. I forget the number. It was Article something, which had to do with copyright and beholding companies who host copyrighted material. Yeah. And what amazes me with that one in particular was the tech community agreed it was a bad idea. The intelligence community agreed it was a really bad idea. The infrastructure, the telecoms agreed it was a bad idea. Your computer scientists, whatever you'd like to call them, agree it's a bad idea. Your general public, those who knew it was going on, agreed it was a bad idea. Then the politicians in the EU voted yes for it, and it got approved.
Yep.
And then they go, oh, I didn't know it was a bad thing.
Yep.
I feel like we almost need like our own like ACLU, but just for tech stuff, like a protection group for the normal person when it comes to technology. And maybe we even have one of those. Who knows?
You know what? That's a great idea, and maybe you and I need to start it because that's actually a really good idea. And that is something that, and maybe it should just be called the Jacob and Elliot agree, therefore it is right group. I'm only half kidding about that because there's certain things like these are tech issues that infringe on freedoms, and you're being idiots. Like we got to stop that. And I think some of that gets covered by the ACLU, honestly. Like some of the ACLU really, I think, does once they know about it, it's big enough, and they can bring a suit forward. I think it usually comes, into play there. So we really need a group that isn't implicitly biased toward as pro these tech companies or whatever, who can sit down with the politicians and go, no, do not do that. Yeah. So the the thing is, so the one that gets brought up the most about this breakup thing is Facebook.
Yeah.
And that's the one that I have the least problem with them breaking up because I feel like they grew through acquisition, and they in the Warren Buffett, he has this term of like building a moat around your business, right? So the way that Facebook built a moat around their business was by buying up their competitors. And you should not be like, that is something that it's fundamentally anti-competitive behavior. They should not have been allowed to do that.
What scares me with Facebook is, and I'm sure you can concur on this, everything we've seen, every bit has said, hey, Facebook not only does not care about your data, about you.
They don't care about anything.
We have never cared about it.
Oh, right.
Ever.
Right.
And
they had passwords in the clear.
Yeah.
So your password that you typed in to access Facebook, at one point, if you signed up to Facebook early enough, was probably stored in your password and my password were probably among those, were probably stored in basically an Excel spreadsheet in the clear.
As raw data
that could be read. Any employee could have looked up.
Yep.
That is insanity.
Facebook has access
They had thousands of employees, many or most of which could have just looked it up and grabbed my password.
Facebook has access to your entire life. And I mean, think about it. Facebook tracks everything you do on Facebook.
Yep.
People know that.
Right.
Does the general public know that they track everything you do on other websites?
No, they don't know that. But
but
you also have their authentication. So you log into other apps. I mean, I don't think banks ever support the Facebook login, but maybe some do.
I don't think,
I've
never
but
seen
like
one.
lots of other things do. Lots of other things that include financial things with your payment information do have Facebook.
They track your physical location constantly.
Scary.
Even if you have your location data off.
Yeah.
Facebook knows where you are 24/7.
Yeah, so actually the new iOS update is going to try to circumvent a little bit of that, of their nasty tricks, but they'll use your Bluetooth and they'll use your Wi-Fi. They are tracking you. They'll nasty tricks to track you.
They'll use physical what's the word I'm looking for? NFC chips in stores.
Yes.
If you just walk past one, it goes, "Hey, Facebook, they're at this place."
So they're a bad company. I think that anybody, by any objective terms, I think they are a bad company. They're using your data for evil.
Mm-hmm.
They're not a good company. Now, whether they're good or bad, the market should make those decisions for the most part if they're not breaking any laws. Maybe there should be some laws, and maybe they would break those. Maybe there should be punishment, but as of now, they haven't broken those, so whatever. But they're not doing good things.
What I've seen is Facebook in particular has been the beacon showing that our laws, our system for punishing a company, and especially for punishing a company for data, don't exist.
Yeah.
And we're essentially using our judgment from the 90s to evaluate where Facebook stands in the world.
Well, so I get that it's frustrating that we don't move faster in developing smart regulations. However, I don't want us to knee-jerk and have and try to fight yesterday's battles. I do want us to have, I want us to build regulations that are built more like the Constitution, things that can be forward-looking, right?
Mm-hmm.
That can be applied to future things. Fight the intent rather than the specifics. We write laws today that are just way too specific, and then all they have to do is change one thing and they skirt the law. I don't want to see that happen. That's what I'm really afraid of, that we're gonna write some regulation and Facebook will be like, all right, that's fine. We'll just change this one thing and we're fine.
I find it funny because you mentioned earlier that just being big isn't a bad thing, right?
Well, it ends up being bad if you buy up all your competitors.
So
that's the part that's bad.
What I'm thinking is the problems we're having with these companies, which we are having problems with all of them. All of them, there are serious problems between them and the consumer. The problem is with that is the consumer doesn't know about a lot of the problems. But the biggest thing is it shouldn't be this industry, the big companies in it need to be broken up. It's an all or nothing thing to me. Either all companies that are at the size of Facebook need to be broken up, or none of them do. You can't just say because it's the industry that scares you that they need to be broken up.
Well, okay.
Would you agree with that?
No, because it's more complicated than that. Because what is size? Is size their market cap? Is size their income? Is it their profit? Is it their number of employees?
Right. Whatever the definition is, it can't be a solo industry thing, though.
Okay.
If Facebook is too big, and the way that's determined is by amount of revenue, let's just say, then all your telecom companies and your energy companies of the same size, they also need to be broken up.
Okay, so this is an interesting number. So I was just looking at the Fortune 500 list. Facebook appears at number 57 on that list. Okay.
That's pretty big, but...
Number 56 happens to be Humana.
Okay.
So, which, of course, living in Green Bay, we're all familiar with Humana.
They're pretty big in our area.
They're one of,
they're
one of the largest insurance companies. And insurance companies, through acquisitions, have grown huge and powerful also.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would apply that same reasoning to things like insurance companies.
What about 55? Let's just take a couple just to see what you got there.
Okay, so 55 is HP, which has also grown through acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
54 is Cisco with an S, so Cisco Foods. I'm not super familiar with how they've grown.
Neither am I.
Number
I'm
50,
more familiar with the other Cisco.
But number 53, Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Grown through acquisitions. And I think this probably doesn't even include some of their latest acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is the thing. These biggest companies have grown through acquisitions. And I think that is the thing I have a problem with, because they're removing competitors from the playing field. And competition is what makes the whole system work. And I think we lose sight of that. We focus on the shiny toys that we get out of gobbling up the competition. Like, oh, well, I'll get, if Apple buys up Disney, I'll get Mickey Mouse for free on my iPhone. Oh, but I'm paying extra for my iPhone.
Disney bought 20th Century Fox.
Yeah.
And it was, the biggest, if not one of the biggest entertainment buyouts in history.
Yeah.
Giving Disney access to more than 40% of all movies and TV shows ever.
Right.
And that's terrifying, but I get it. I was so excited. I'm like, man, I'm going to get to see the Fantastic Four as in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now. And, maybe now that it's got Disney funding, we can get a new season of Futurama and stuff like that.
But they could have that could have worked the other way. Disney could have sold Marvel to Fox.
Oh, yeah.
And the same end could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, that we don't have to make excuses for their predatory behavior.
No.
Mickey Mouse is a predator in lots of ways. And Mickey Mouse is a reason for the insane copyright laws that we have.
We could do an entire episode on that.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know how much time we took on this whole thing, but so I'm actually interested in talking about how the actual breakup of these companies would occur. So in terms of Facebook, how do you think the Facebook breakup could actually happen? How would you break it up?
If we determined, yes, Facebook's getting broken up.
Would you break it up like the Baby Bells? Would we have a Wisconsin Facebook and a Michigan Facebook?
See, I don't think that would work. Because,
Of course it wouldn't. That'd be insane.
No, but breaking Instagram off into its own company would make sense.
So Instagram was independent and it got purchased.
Is taking all of their purchases and
spinning them off.
Oculus would be spun off. WhatsApp would be re-spun off. But the key thing here is we need to make sure they can't get back together then.
Right.
Like what happened to all the bells.
Yeah. I don't understand why we can't just make a hard and fast rule. Once you're a public company, you don't get to buy any other public companies. Why is this not an okay rule?
Well, that would just make more companies be private.
Again, what's the problem with that?
I don't know. I'm just saying
we do have some rules as to
maybe
once you become
unintended consequences.
Well, you know what? I don't know, because I've heard that. So once you hit a certain stage of getting funding, you have to become public. So there is a thing. There's a piece to that. Once you have a certain number of investors, for instance, then you're basically public, right? So, but okay. Then you're public and you don't get to acquire anybody. You play by different rules because you're too big. I think that's actually okay.
I'm
missing this. I'm missing the problem with a nice simple demarcation point of you're a huge company and we don't apply stupid rules to little companies. We pass way too many rules that say corporation. The two of us can start a corporation.
It's
and that applying the same rule to us and to Disney is ludicrous.
What worries me is the entire system is built around the goal of a company getting bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. They are legally obligated to get bigger and bigger. Bigger profits year over year, quarter over quarter. Yeah. That's how the system works. Why? Why can't you have?
Well, that should be their goal, but we also need to have a check on that system, and that check on that system needs to be we don't allow those companies to merge.
All right. Well, I think we've gone on long enough. Maybe.
We didn't touch on the other two companies.
Oh yeah.
So just briefly,
right. Google.
Yeah. So Google, how would you break up Google?
Oh God, Google's a mess already. Because it's not Google, it's Alphabet, right?
True. But it's basically Google.
So search would have to be siphoned off into its own thing.
So search would be its own.
A lot of your problems with Google come from the fact that they need data specifically for search.
Right.
That's rule number one. That search is the reason they do everything. It's the AdWords.
Mm-hmm.
That is, Google is an ad company first and foremost.
Of course, right?
Most people don't realize that.
No.
They think they're a phone company or they're a YouTube company.
Right.
No, they're an ad company. Their goal is to serve advertisements.
So you'd spin it off. YouTube would be a company?
That's hard to say because there would be some consequences there because YouTube on its own is not profitable.
Okay.
So that's kind of, it's hard to say how they would have to break that up. And the biggest problem here is everything that Google does, unlike, say, Facebook, is intertwined with each other. YouTube uses the same algorithms that Google search does and the same Google AdWords. And it's connected to, I was going to say Google Plus, but that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
It's connected through to all of Google. It's pre-installed on your Android phone.
Yeah. Well, these are some of the excuses that Microsoft used in their antitrust.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, well, the browser is part of the operating system. We can't pull these things apart. Nonsense. You can pull these things apart. It can be pulled apart. Yeah, but it'll take you some work and it'll cost you some money. Maybe you shouldn't have intertwined everything in the first place.
Maybe we should just make the tech companies make all their source code open source. That way we can get alternative.
Well, and I think a lot of it is. I really don't think it's that big of a deal. It might take 6 months for them to work on it, to break it up. Like, okay, big deal.
I think it would be real good if we got like third-party applications for like YouTube and whatnot. So the videos being served are the same, but from a different like intermediate, kind of like how browsers work.
If YouTube was its own company, I think they would do a lot of things differently.
We need Firefoxes.
Yeah, but I think so. This is the thing. Each of those individual companies, if they didn't have to be beholden to the master company, they would end up being a little bit bigger. And YouTube would be profitable on its own if it wasn't beholden to the big company.
All right, Amazon.
So
shopping.
So Amazon. So I watched it was the Code Conference, and Kara Swisher did an interview with, and I had it up. The Andy Jassy. He's the CEO of Amazon Web Services. So Amazon Web Services is their cloud computing service that Amazon makes. That's their business service.
Which is very popular, if you did not know that.
Well, they're the biggest.
Mm-hmm.
They're bigger than Google. So
they're bigger than Microsoft.
Know that. People don't have a clue about that.
It's the backbone of their company at this point.
So basically, companies like Netflix got their start on AWS and still have a bunch of their stuff on AWS. And so AWS could very easily, with a little bit of work to separate the back ends, could be its own separate company.
Yeah.
And that is a clear-cut case of, that should probably happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that did not happen through acquisition, but Amazon has made some acquisitions.
Whole Foods,
Zappos. Yeah. Those are two that come to mind right away. And maybe those should be spun off. Maybe not.
Or maybe they can be kept with retail, the online retail.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're so big that maybe those should be spun off.
Maybe.
I don't know. But certainly AWS should be spun off.
Yeah.
But they have big competitors in that space, so maybe those competitors should also be split up.
Yeah,
in the same way.
Microsoft's Azure.
Yeah. So this is where the slippery slope happens. It's like, well, none of these companies have the same kind of market dominance, except for Google with Android. None of these companies, and Google with search too. None of these companies have the same kind of market dominance that Microsoft had in the 90s. So the whole talk of like breaking these companies up, it becomes a little more difficult to justify compared to the whole Microsoft thing. But yet, in the same token, it becomes a little bit easier to visualize like how you would cut them up.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them grew through acquisition.
All right. Well, I think that's a good end.
Sounds like you're trying to wrap me up here, Jacob.
Yeah, I am, because you'll talk for 6 hours. I know
this is just such a fascinating thing. I mean, I feel like we could talk for hours about the whole thing.
If anyone out there wants us to do a continuation, maybe we missed some points, or maybe there's a different way to look at it, let us know.
There's a ton. We glossed over so much.
Yep.
So please continue the discussion on Facebook. Ouch.
Or in Google's YouTube comments. Ouch.
That's a terrible place to do conversations, though.
Sometimes.
Honestly. For all my complaints about Facebook, it is a great way to have conversations. So,
Also,
Yes,
be on the lookout because we're back to doing this regularly, right?
well, I mean, you're not going to die again, are you?
No. You guys, want to let us know what you want to see? Let us know.
Yeah.
Is there a particular topic? The election, the 2020 election's only 500 and some odd days away.
Right.
So, we just got to talk about that 24/7.
I think we'll have plenty more to say.
Yeah.
And I think we'll, if there's any guests that you'd like to have on, get those to me. And the Patreon, please visit the what's the address for the Patreon?
Dang it. Patreon.com/newsmakers.
Thank you. Okay. Otherwise, subscribe. Please promote the show to your friends. Anybody who you think would be interested in these things, please pass along. Thank you.
Bye.